Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We're still waiting for a couple of the people on our panel, but we will make do until they get here. So I'm Cheryl Neckerman. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Schenectady County for one more month. Thank you all for coming tonight, especially when it's so hot out. So this is all about the Democracy During Detention Act. So this is some legislation that's proposed for the state legislature. And so just a little background is that most citizens that are detained in jail actually are eligible to vote. The only people that cannot vote, other than non-citizens of course, are people that are serving a sentence right now for a felony conviction. So if you're in jail for a misdemeanor, or if you have not been charged yet, or have not gone to trial yet, you can vote. And once a person has completed their sentence, they can vote. A person who's on parole or probation, they can vote. So by definition, if the person is outside of jail, they can vote. The thing is, not everybody knows that, including the people that work at the jail. They don't all know it. So this legislation, the Democracy During Detention Act, the DDDA, is designed to just make it more consistent. Because right now, it really depends on the sheriff in each county who's running the jail, and also the Board of Elections, because they're the ones that actually administer the election. But this legislation would still have it in the hands of the Board of Elections, but now everybody is required to offer that opportunity to vote. So if everybody shows up today, we have 4 panelists. Leanna Lightborn, who's the campaign director for the League of Women Voters of New York State. So she's in charge of shepherding this legislation through. We also have Jamel Mohammed, who's right here. He is the founder and president of the Youth Life Support Network. We're waiting for Courtney Cheers. She's the community outreach director for the Schenectady NAACP. And we have Aramis Suarez, who's the president of the NAACP Union College chapter. But we have a special guest. We're going to lead off with an original poem by Adonis Richards. Now let me just give Adonis's bio here. He's also known as Sincerely, Donnie, the Quiet Storm, and the Ghostwriter. He's an Afro-Latino poet, writer, DEIB advocate, and restorative practices advocate. And right now, he's the program coordinator for the Office of Intercultural Affairs at Union College. He's also the inaugural poet laureate for the city of Schenectady. He has a bachelor's in political science and a master's in education, technology, and leadership. He spent 6 years earning both degrees at SUNY Potsdam and is now pursuing a doctoral degree in educational leadership. Beginning his writing journey in 2016 after performing a piece at a hip-hop show, Adonis has since written 3 poetry books and established his media and writing company, Lucid Writers. And now we're going to have Adonis give us his poem.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna find the poem really quickly and then I'll get started. All right. Poem goes like this. We are the catalysts for cataclysmic change. Powerful parables roar through the echo chambers like a storm, loudly beating the earth, shattering the chaotic injustices cascading over our people. We are the legendary Hyperkina Freak, raining down hailstones, passionately persevering like slaves to men and women today. This is their requiem. And I, the conductor, compelling the sirens to change to a new age as we carry on the legacies for those whose dreams for freedom birthed this maelstrom of victory and glory in the eyes of the less fortunate. We demand justice. We demand respect. Forged from our hands and those backs of the ancestors, we carve an underground railroad out of the mental subjugation our oppressors plagued us with. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We have nothing to lose but these chains. Hatred and rage have reigned, even the stain of disdain combined with disarray. Now we make them quake. As we step and shake out of the dirt, they try to bury us in, not knowing we were the seeds, spreading flowers that bloom through the concrete they try to slap on top of us. And now as we become the meadows of freedom, we scream to the sun, no justice, no peace. Let us bathe in the sins of our oppressors, wading in the shallow waters they try to drown us in. Our joy in the face of their despair will be the ultimate retort to tyranny. In no cage like a bird, we still rise across the horizon as we find reparations and salvation that no amount of devastation can make us fall victim to this treacherous hatred by this forsaken nation. With a good cry, we learn from tears and laughter, living, learning, even peace in our pace. Matriculating millions, marching, multiplying, meticulous, mastery, mashing, malevolent forces away with the steel-toed boot strapped to demolish the pillars this country is made of. Today we smile and cross those bridges not in fear of harm, but in confidence of a new dawn. For we are the very existence of a legacy that never loses luster. Limber in my linguistic, lucrative reference of power pulsing past passion, breaking walls of false justice, blocking the shackle from freedom today. We honor just us in the name of justice.
Well, thank you, Adonis. All right, our next speaker will be Jamel Mohammed. He is the president and CEO of Youth Life Support Network. It is a nationally recognized community violence intervention leader, youth advocate, and the founder of that network. The nonprofit serves Albany, Schenectady, and Rensselaer counties through innovative street outreach, reentry support, and youth development programs. He has dedicated his life to helping individuals and communities break the cycles of violence, incarceration, and poverty. Mohammed's work is deeply informed by lived experience. Earlier in his life, he served more than 17 years in prison, a period that became a transformative turning point. During his incarceration, he committed himself to personal growth, mentorship, and leadership, guided by individuals who encouraged him to use his life to help others. These experiences ultimately shaped his mission to support young people, returning citizens, and communities impacted by violence and the justice system. After returning home, Mohammed founded the Youth Life Support Network to create pathways for healing, opportunity, and community safety. Under his leadership, the organization has developed initiatives such as One Life to Live, a gun and gang violence prevention program that uses street outreach and mediation to prevent conflicts before they escalate, and Back to Life, a reintegration program that supports individuals returning from incarceration as they rebuild their lives. Mohammed and his team work directly in neighborhoods across the capital region, mediating conflicts, mentoring youth, and connecting individuals to resources that reduce violence and strengthen families. And hopefully he still has something to say after that very long introduction.
Good evening and thank you. Actually, that was going to be my statement. What else is it to say? What I will say is that I thank you for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. I'm definitely humbled and grateful to be able to engage the community on such important topics, important issues. And though there's a lot that has happened, and I can say on this particular topic, I don't know what the other counties and other regions in New York State are doing, but I do know that I admire and I'm glad to be a part of Schenectady County in this regard with their progressive and aggressive approaches when it comes down to the incarcerated population or protecting the rights of those who have to vote. So the introduction was there. I'm an open book. Don't feel that any question, that you have may be offensive or any statement. We're here for a dialogue and a conversation and to enlighten each other and to support each other. So feel free to, any questions, any thoughts, any ideas. I'm all here. So again, I thank you for coming out, especially on a beautiful day, as was said. And I thank you for being supportive.
Over here. I'm not gonna let you get off that easy. So tell me, what were your experiences with voting when you were in jail?
It's interesting actually because while I was incarcerated in the state system in particular, I did state and federal time, and I was a part of a inmate organization. Actually, it was a collaboration. We had created a collaboration of all of the inmate organizations to come to the table to discuss different issues that relate to the population needs. And I was in Greenhaven Prison at the time down in Dutchess County, and this was 1993-94. I know I'm aging myself. But it was in 1993-94, and it was actually a lot of history made during that time there. We were able to, with that collaboration, we were able to convene the first and I think maybe the only Black and Puerto Rican caucus in that facility, a meeting with the caucus members at that time. And we discussed a lot of things, prison expansion, programming, and voting was one of them. And we did not have the right insight, or at least we were taught, and there's so much to learn about this whole voting thing, and so much that we're learning. One of the individuals that had served time there, he had did, I think, 27 years and went home. And he had sent some ballots, registration forms in, and told us to fill them out and just send them out. And we were saying, we don't have the right to vote, we don't have this. And because he had looked, and his name was Eddie Ellis, a pillar in the movement, and he encouraged us. We filled out the registration forms, the information came back, and we were able to actually vote while we were at the prison. Whether that was, legit, not legit, but he had studied with a team of individuals from the Center of Law and Justice with Dr. Alice Green in Albany, and a team of other paralegals searching the act to see where it stipulated that we explicitly could not have the vote counted. And they checked case law and everything, and there was nothing that they can find. So we did continue to send the votes out from there. Now, on the other side of the coin, when I was in the federal system, what we did learn is that a lot of people did continue to have their voting rights. But the catch of it that I think was a major issue, especially when you talk about racial disparities, is when we registered and when we voted, we had to use the facility address to register, which now when you look at it from that standpoint, it disproportionately if you look where all of the prisons are at, they typically were in, areas where there's a lot of farmland, not a big community, not a lot of development. So now your population went from maybe 10,000 to 20,000 because of the population of the prisons and the prisoners, the inmate population. So that was a big thing that we learned on that side. And what we would do is, when we had individuals fill out the registration forms, that we still would have them put their home addresses. especially since it was going to be an absentee ballot. So there's a lot of nuances and a lot of things that, different experiences with it. Again, whether they were challenged at some point and taken off the count, or I'm not sure, but we did at least challenge the process and challenge the system.
Okay, so we have Cleanna Lightborn here. Cleanna is a voting rights advocate, policy strategist, and Black feminist organizer working at the intersection of democracy, governance, and systems change. A first-generation American and the daughter of Caribbean immigrants, her work focuses on how public policy shapes community outcomes, civic participation, and access to power. She currently serves as campaign director at the League of Women Voters of New York State, where she leads statewide legislative advocacy and coalition strategy focused on expanding democratic participation and modernizing voter access infrastructure. Cleanna is the lead strategist behind New York's Democracy During Detention Act, landmark legislation aimed at ensuring eligible voters detained in local jails can fully access the ballot through standardized election administration systems. With a background in psychology and a master's degree in forensic mental health from the Sage Colleges and a bachelor's in psychology from Union College, Cleanna brings a multidisciplinary lens to advocacy, combining policy analysis, narrative strategy, coalition building, and public education. Take it away.
Thank you so much. What was the question? Did you have a question or just an intro?
That was just the intro.
Perfect. Well, hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your grace and patience as I make my way from bustling Albany, where our budget is over 30 days late. Wonderful. I am so glad to be here today to talk to you all about voting in jails, the Democracy During Detention Act specifically, and how it is so important for New York State to not only defend democracy, but also fortify it. Not only to ensure that we keep our voting rights, but that voting rights reaches every eligible voter in New York State. This is something that we are lacking at the moment. In 2024, the League of Women Voters did a jail voting survey, a jail voting report, where we found that less than 10 or less than maybe 15 or so jails across New York State had an in-jail voting program. And for some of those places, in-jail voting meant that they had a poster somewhere, or that they had a registration application somewhere in some drawer, but we know if people ask for it, they can get one. That doesn't happen. A lot of times people who are behind bars have been historically separated from the vote already. These arrests often come from underrepresented and underserved communities that are over-policed. That means we are seeing large groups of individuals being pulled out of their communities, and not only are we losing that resource, not only are we losing that father, that mother, that aunt, that sister, that extra caretaker of the family, that extra support in the family, but we are losing voting power when people are behind bars. The Democracy During Detention Act would codify voting behind bars. Right now it is legal to vote behind bars, but when you tell sheriffs, they say, we don't have time for that. And when you ask the BOE to show, is anyone here from the BOE? No. Good. When you ask the BOE about it, they say, nah, make us. We won't do it until it's a law. It's understandable. The Board of Elections is, of course, working overtime and they are under budgeted, but the Democracy During Detention Act has money allocated to it, even though it is very minimal costs. It's pretty much paying for an individual to maybe do some overtime or show up on a Saturday, but not even that. I have done voting outreach at Rikers last year, and it probably took us 4 hours to do, 4 hours to even maybe an hour or so to get onto the island. 2 or so hours we had to register folks, and we were able to reach over 40 people in those few hours. So even a few hours of work in jails really makes a difference. We, in particular, were in the juvenile unit, and so we were able to talk to folks who were under the age of 25 and under, about voting in jails. And this happened right after Mamdani's election, so many of them already knew or, felt like they had FOMO, really. And we played up on that FOMO. We let them know that the governor's race is coming up soon and that there are a number of other positions that they can also vote for. And when they asked us which ones, we were like, you're gonna have to come to the next civic education program so that you can learn more. And that's another thing that the Democracy During Detention Act offers. We're not giving everyone a lightsaber without a manual. What we're doing is also providing civic education, language access, and ADA compliance to make sure that folks understand the ballots that they are filling out. Like I mentioned before, this is an easy fix. This is a cheap fix with a high impact. We requested $500,000 in the budget this year. It got into the assembly. We don't know where it is at this point. No one's talking to us, but we remain hopeful that this funding would still be available, and so that individuals can practice the right to vote in jails the way that they are supposed to. Thank you.
Now, Courtney is not here, right? Okay, so we will finish up with Aramis Suarez. He is a biology major, junior at Union College, and we're going to give him a break because he just got roped into this today.
Oh, wow.
It's going to do good, I'm sure of it. He is the president of the student chapter of the NAACP at Union. He's been a Posse Scholar since freshman year, and people who are familiar with the program know this is a very special honor. So while he's been in Schenectady, he really has been involved with extending a hand to the wider Schenectady community, especially low-income people. And he was attracted to the NAACP because of its social justice emphasis and community outreach. And let's hear from Aramis.
Thank you guys for having me. I got roped into this last minute, but I'm so happy to be here and with these panelists who I learned a lot from just sitting here. It's really interesting to hear about you guys' civic engagement, especially, being able to vote in personal experience voting in jail and in prison. But when we think about voting in general, I think it's important to take a step back and look at the history of voting in this country. During Reconstruction, 15th Amendment was passed to let Black men in America vote. And right when it passed, there was a lot of steps to get people elected, and you can see that there was a lot of Black people, especially in local government. People calling local government down in the South when they were first let people of color vote. But then they saw us, making strides to be able to vote, and they used the Jim Crow laws and that whole situation when the Ku Klux Klan was stopping them from voting. Just scaring people so they won't be able to vote. And then they've had the literacy, voting literacy things that just made it impossible. So we look at this and we can see that voting is never a linear it was never a linear thing. So we can't be we got the right to vote, we got everybody that we needed to in offices. Because they use things like this to stop us from voting. You can see how, what was it? There was, you just mentioned it, but there was the office that is you want these people in the jail to vote? No, you don't.
Board of Elections.
Yeah, Board of Elections.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got tripped up on words there.
No, you're fine.
So you can see that, progress is never linear. And then we can see that a lot of the progress we did make is young people voting, and then these days, voting is just, people think about it, okay, vote for the president every 4 years. And I really want people to know that midterm elections and your local elections is how you really make change in your local areas. You can see, like the DDDA, that this is something that you vote for in your local elections. That's what affects your day-to-day life. And us as young people, I want to say people like 30 under, don't really realize that. We can see it a lot back home where I'm from Massachusetts. There's when I was in high school, we turned 18 and then we were just like, okay, we're waiting for the next presidential election. But I had a teacher who taught me about local elections, and then I looked over everything that we're voting on in the local elections and realized these are the things I genuinely cared about. So I just wanted to, like, after that, I just wanted to, like, get the word out there, just have people vote in their local elections. And I think this is another big push to have young people vote in the local elections, because we're losing the voting population in prison and in jail, but we're also losing the young voters if we don't get involved locally. So that's my 2 cents. I think you guys did a great job explaining everything and giving you guys this background. That's really all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for listening to me.
Okay, now we can take questions. Angelise, do you still have your question?
Yeah, I was just, while you were talking about it, I know so little about what happens behind the doors in jail, but do you have access to news, or what kind of news, what kind of information would you get in behind bars that makes you make good decisions in who to vote for?
So it depends on what level of incarceration you're referring to. Well, it depends on what level and what area you're in. It's different. So locally, in the county jails, there's a lot of news available because you have all your local channels. And I say it with reservation because it's also kind of like the survival of the fittest. Those who control the floor, so to say, or the tier controls the TV as well. So where you may have an interest in, the political, social landscape, others may want to watch Jeopardy and, other things as opposed to the news. They do, for the most part, have at least a segment, at least here. One of the things that I did leave out, that we left out of the intro, is uniquely in Schenectady than anywhere else in the state. And I haven't researched, but if I was a betting man, I definitely would put all money on it. Schenectady County Jail is the only facility where inmate services, they call it incarcerated individuals now, they still haven't figured out how to make that incarcerated individual services. But the inmate services department is overseen and managed by an outside entity. We got the contract in 2019. We contracted, Youth Life Support Network contracted with the Sheriff's Office to get responsibility for the Inmate Services Department. And that was because the sheriff, and again, there's going to be a few things that will come out from the conversation that underscores why I said that I'm, humbled and grateful to be a part of Schenectady's landscape, especially hearing, some of the things, the challenges throughout the state or whatever. But the inmate services technically in every other county jurisdiction is a corrections division position. That position is overseen and ran by someone from corrections, one of the COs. It was that way here in Schenectady as well. The gentleman that had the responsibility, Major Elwell, he was a retired superintendent who, needed to get out the house instead of just sitting around. So they brought him back in as the inmate services coordinator, where he came in a few hours a week just to check in with the population, the needs, etc. When he passed away, unfortunately, it left the position open, and Sheriff D'Agostino, and Under Sheriff Barrett at the time, we were in the office, and there was a conversation about filling that position. So Sheriff D'Agostino looked at me and said, Jamel, do you think you can find someone who can take that position? Because I want someone who can understand the needs of the population, but navigate the culture of corrections, which is definitely a challenge. So we found someone, and then we hit the other hurdles. It was a civil service exam, there was qualifications through it, and everything else. Under Sheriff Barrett, in our thinking session, came with the idea of moving that position out of corrections division into a professional service agreement line item, contracted out, and then that kind of gets past all of the civil service and everything else. We brought it over to the county legislature. The county legislature had their questions and ultimately gave their blessings, and hence the contract with Youth Life Support Network began to oversee inmate services. We have a very unique system actually over here. To your question, because it's so many layers that client opened up, and I'm glad that you did. Locally, they do have access to the news, and when I walk the floors, I do see the news on a few times a day on different channels. Once you get into the state system, and when I was in the federal system, it's drastically different. In fact, as I think back, the 6.5 years out of the 17 that I was in New York State Department of Corrections, I can't recall one TV that I saw with the news on. I did all my time in the penitentiary. At the time, we didn't have TVs in the cells. Now you can buy a TV on commissary. Yeah, pluses and minuses. The pluses, it was a security thing, because if they have more people sitting inside watching the TV, they'll have less people in the yards, less incidents happen. So I understood the control side of it. I didn't like it primarily because it also kept people from going to programs and getting other education and stuff outside of the cell.
Okay, we might have some other questions.
Yeah. So it just was the federal system, it was a little better. The federal, because the TVs were inside versus the state were in the backyards, inside the federal, a lot of TVs were on the news, which I think also is why we had the voting registration going on in there.
Okay, any other questions? Janet?
I'm interested in the federal, state, and county systems, and how does the DDDA apply to each one of those systems? Does it apply to all three? And also, any idea how many people would be affected by the DDDA?
Absolutely, thank you so much for asking. It would be about 12,000 people statewide. And it does not impact federal voting. Well, yes, okay. So if you are in a federal penitentiary, then you are a person with a felony, so you would not be eligible to vote. You would be disenfranchised from the vote in New York State in particular. There are other places like Maine, I think Vermont does it, and DC, where even if you are a person with a felony, you do not lose your right to vote. You can still participate. So, because there's no BOE, aren't there any sheriffs in here? Okay, great. So because there's no BOE and no sheriffs, I can tell you this. The Democracy During Detention Act is the first bite of the elephant of disenfranchisement that we're taking. We went to the Capitol and we said, hey, everybody should vote, even if they're a person with a felony. They said, what, are you crazy? Kicked us out. We were like, okay, every person in jail who has the right to vote should be able to vote. And even now they're like, are you crazy? But we are protected by various voting amendments and voting rights and all that fun stuff of being a citizen in America and stuff, which is still valid for now. But if you are the only people absolutely that cannot vote in New York State in particular are people who are not citizens yet and people who are serving or have a felony. Actually, people who are serving in prison with a felony, because even once you're released and you finish your parole and your probation, your rights are restored to you. And that was something that passed a few years ago. So right now, yes, exactly. Yes, so right now what we're working on, we are tapping legislators that passed that legislation who have not yet signed on to our bill, saying, hey, this is the next logical step. We are letting people who've been previously disenfranchised vote. Now let's let folks in jail who are eligible to vote. So it would, so when you ask about federal, state, and then county, they would be able to vote for all of those things if they are being detained in a jail and they are eligible to vote. I hope that helps. Oh, and 12, yes, and the number was 12, well, our last count was 12,626, and considering how a lot of local elections are usually lost by inches, by what, I had a friend who lost their election by 6 votes. 6 votes, you know? So considering how close local elections get, and the fact that local elections, like you said, are extremely important for changing our day-to-day lives in the county, in the state, and the like, it is extremely important that we're making sure that not only people behind bars are able to vote, but that folks that we know are able to vote. So I'm just asking that everyone do 3 things, because you're all in this room, so you are now all election barrier breakers. We are all defendants of democracy. I would knight you if I had a sword, but we have to be sure to remind people of elections when they're happening and the like. If you need help being reminded, I've got interest forms over here. After the Louisiana and Calais ruling, I had to do something. So I made a Google Calendar of the New York State elections, and it has every date that the BOE put out for every election, and it has the statute in the election law, as well as a layman's terms explanation as to why this thing exists. So sometimes you'll see, you know, if you get the calendar, you'll see like XYZ is due on this day, and you're like, what the heck does that mean? Well, you can open up the notes and see what it is and why it's done that way. And so if you're interested, you can come up afterwards, fill out this contact info. I will share the calendar with you, and it's just something that you can add to your Google Calendar. So, yeah.
Yes. Two-parter. Where are you getting the most support for this, and what's your biggest challenge to getting this passed?
Thank you. So we're getting the most support. It's hard to say. We're actually getting really good support. We have about 20 or so senators that are on. We have about like 22 the last time I checked, maybe 21, 22. And we've got about almost 40 assembly members who are supporting. The issue that we're running into now is that because of so many federal cuts, budgetary, all these programs that are being cut, we go into the rooms and we say, hey, we need to talk about elections. We need to think about elections. Does anyone here work in the Senate or the Assembly? Great. And so what's going on is that they're like, we have other things to think about, because unfortunately, but very often, our legislators are not thinking long term. They're thinking, especially because this year is an election year, they're thinking, what can I do to not rock the boat too much that I'll lose voters, but rock the boat enough to say like, yeah, I'll fight for you, that kind of thing. So we are in a very precarious situation where if they can do something around like health insurance, like, you know, around access to healthcare, around this auto insurance thing that Hochul is obsessed with, and housing, those kind of things, those are what they are seeing as like immediate needs, and food and that kind of thing. They are focusing on those things. So when we come into the room with voting rights and stuff, they're like, no, we can't right now. And we're just like, give us an extra 5 minutes and we will teach you, we will talk to you about how this is important for the long term.
Especially considering that people already have that right to vote. We're just trying to make it more uniform and make sure everybody knows about it. Any other questions? Jen?
Let's say someone has served time for a felony and finished parole. What's the best way that's probably a lot of people who are not in detention right now, but may not realize that they could register to vote. What's the best way to get information to people who have been released and are eligible?
You want to go first?
I'm sure that Kyle is going to have more to add to what I'm going to say. I'm going to take the front end side of it, which is the needs. When individuals are coming out of incarceration, they're thinking more of their immediate needs. Many of them are very discouraged and jaded when you talk about the system itself. So it's not, once they're out, they're looking at food, clothing, shelter. So trying to get them into a room to talk about voting at that moment is a challenge. Not impossible, just a challenge. So definitely has to be more boots on the ground, community outreach, engagement, and education to start with. One thing that I'll say to the progress that's made in Schenectady, and I'm not championing Schenectady for any reason except for it deserves it. I'm a native, I'm born and raised in Albany, but this is where I have to hold the torch up. At the county jail, some of the challenges that you speak of that's going on with the different county jails, we don't have those challenges in Schenectady. The biggest thing in Schenectady is getting one thing, I think you mentioned the civic education. I think that's something that would take a major lead in making that effect, because you're dealing with them while they're sitting, and no pun intended, they're a captive audience. And they're looking for things to do, they're looking for ways to better themselves. And that's the best time, because they have time that's not challenged. We're worrying about a mill or a bill, or where they're gonna lay their head, or whatever the case may be. At the county jail in Schenectady, overseeing inmate services, I have different forms that are pushed down from the superintendent, from the sheriff, where my team, with everyone that's there, anyone that's going out for discharge, we automatically let them know that they do have voting rights. Those who are there, even if they're not on our discharge planning level, I walk the jail at least once a month. I try to do twice a month, and the BOE,
Our besties.
the BOE and the League of Women Voters are very, very involved in the jail in Schenectady as far as that voting process is concerned. They have definitely, the League of Women Voters they're notoriously aggressive about making sure that those in there know that they have the right and, to get ballots and things in. What I'm trying to do there is collaborate better between the two. That is not a competition on who gets in first or whatever the case may be, versus how we can use both to spread out how much time we get in with them. because county jails also are a very fluid population. You give it 90 days and you got a whole nother population. So we need more frequent engagement there, so that way, even if they still kind of discouraged, once they're out, at least the seed is planted. You know, at least it's there and they do know, and when there is an electrifying local election or whatever the case may be, people may, you know, think about, you know what, I can vote. You know, I'm going to participate in that process. So a lot of it is just mobilization and education, hitting them where it can, because I do know, you know, just over in Albany County, some of the programs we do here, I talk to some of the providers, and they say they try to get into Albany County, and they tell them thank you, but no thank you. So we don't have the disadvantage, we have an advantage, but we're not taking advantage of that advantage by getting in more and having more education and mobilization.
Aggressive, huh? You haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Assertive.
Better. Actually, we had a chat with the Board of Elections recently, and they did kind of warn us off of actually registering people to vote. We had been having a big argument with them about this, but they gave us a good reason. And you actually touched on it, that it's a very transient population. And when they go in, they don't know that somebody already filled out the voter registration form 2 weeks ago. So we are revamping our role. Now you know. But now we're going to be the cheerleaders. That we are going to be in there to tell people why they should vote, all the reasons why they should. And then we'll let the Board of Elections actually fill out the voter registration forms.
Well, can I just add to you?
Well, I don't know. Are you going to call me aggressive?
No. Slightly, but no. So here's what I would suggest, me being responsible for that, that whole operation there. Anytime, as I have offered, you want to walk the facility, you know, if you want to walk the floors and have conversations on the floors, and anytime they see people without uniform, they always ask, who are you? So there will be that provoking conversation of who are you, and you will have that opportunity. Anytime I'm on the floor, especially if I'm walking with anyone with that particular purpose, I carry the forms with me. So at any point that you're walking and they say they want to register, we will register them. So and this is one of the biggest things with our society as a whole, this territorialism.
Absolutely.
You know, the territorialism and you know, having to function in silos, that, you know, one person has rightful ownership of something that they don't. And this is me speaking, in case anybody has to worry about who hears or don't hear, but you don't have to worry about that barrier. What I need, being responsible for that population, is more engagement in the population. What happens is, a lot of times, the presence isn't there until right at that time.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're trying to kind of race to get everybody registered within a week or two before, you know, everything. But if we go in more frequently and, you know, that is there, that people have the awareness, give it time to marinate, because what also happens is when people leave out, because it's a small window, it's like a week or two later, they're saying, oh, you know, can I register to vote, or can I this? But now the time is already passed. You know, so if you can, you know, that can work a schedule where you can come in more frequently.
I'm doing that.
And do it aggressively.
Did you want to add?
Yes. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why we need to create a standardized outreach program with the Board of Elections and with the Sheriff's Department, because that definitely merits pushback, but we run the risk of if the league sets them enough, then they can say, you know what, never mind. Because at the end of the day, these in-jail voting programs that exist right now are all on the whim of someone's mood, you know, whether or not the sheriff wants to let them in today, whether or not, you know, we have someone available. In Albany County, this is a very real issue, that we have one individual who was very close to Sheriff Craig Apple and was trusted, and they would go in and they would do the voting in jails and everything. They would have their group, but she is ill or she doesn't want to do it anymore. Whatever reason, it's not happening now. And so now we're doing this outreach, and you know, the sheriff is like, good luck with that. Or, oh, there's something going on, we can't really have new programs go, you know, and they don't have to tell us a reason. They can just say no, and for some reason, sheriffs know that no is a full sentence, and I'm very annoyed by that. But you know, at the end of the day, when they deny access, and when the Board of Elections, refuses to show up as well, we can't do anything else. So passing legislation like this would create oversight from the New York State Board of Elections, who supports this bill and calls it a priority. The Democratic caucus released their priorities for 2026, and we were on that. So literally, the New York State Board of Elections is saying, hey, this bill doesn't suck, it's something we can do, and we need it, and still we're getting hemming and hawing. The president of the Sheriff's Association is the champion of DDDA in that Ulster County, where he resides, is pretty much like the golden program that we refer to. When we have other counties trying to do their in-jail voting programs and they run into an issue, we always send them to Ulster County, because both the Democratic commissioner there and the sheriff can change minds with one phone call, and it's happened before. That's how much power and support we have behind us. So the fact that New York State, the fact that our electeds are not passing this right now is just, it's unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Okay, any other questions, or I think it might be time to wrap this up. I just want to point out that the League of Women Voters has some brochures on the back table, including one for people that are formerly incarcerated, so that they know they do have the right to vote.
One more quick question. In the last couple of years, I've been very active in some of the postcard campaigns just to get out the vote. Would addresses be available to people who are incarcerated, to be able to let them know that they do have a right to vote? If you are not registered, this is where you need to ask for it. Is that something we'd have access to put together a postcard campaign?
Like a mailing list?
Or if the postcards were written and we know we needed so many for, say, Schenectady County or any other county, that we write that many and then they get distributed in-house, like handwritten, this?
I think I'm gonna first say that we can figure a way to make it happen. I'm not a person that believes in, what can't happen. For me to be a formerly incarcerated black male felon and walk in and out of the county jail through the front door whenever I desire, to me eliminates all impossibilities. So I'm gonna say it can happen. I'm just trying to process that mailing list from a standpoint that how do you get the names of everyone that's there, especially because it is so transient. And two, I know once a person is incarcerated, their information is public. So it's not a thing of violating anybody's rights of privacy, because once they're arrested, it's a public matter. I just don't know. We can figure it out. You got an idea?
I would have to think about it more, but what you're saying is that we would write postcards to individuals who are eligible to vote to let them know, hey, you can vote, that kind of thing?
Yes, or if it's in there, if they're eligible to vote, but they don't know that they need to be registered, that this is where you go to confirm that you're registered or something.
Oh, yes.
Or to get the, if you're not actually registered to vote, you need to reach out to this office while you're incarcerated.
Yes, so this is a thing that should the BOE and the Sheriff's Department come together to do this work, that is something that would be able to, like, we would be able to create a more substantial outreach program where, you know, we get the trifecta. It's the Board of Elections, it's the Sheriff's Department, and it's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that focuses on voting advocacy and the like. Together they can work on that. We can get, I think there's, we can get the names from the sheriffs. Hey, we're having we're coming in to register people to vote in the next 2 weeks. Who do you have right now? And then the sheriff would send that to the BOE. They can check it against their list of who's eligible to vote, who's already registered, and find those gaps in between. And then you can come in with a more targeted outreach group rather than, so that's why I'm annoyed where they're like, oh, we don't know who can vote on it. It's like you just ask the sheriff for the names and you can find that out. That's why I'm like, I don't like that. But
I get that, because when it comes down to that time period, what I do is I produce a list, an in-house list of everyone that's there at the time you make the request. Now tomorrow it may be at least 10% different, but I'll give you a list of everyone that's there. They run it against who's registered at least. I don't know about the eligibility, but I know they run it against who's registered. And if they want to do absentee ballot or whatever, if there's a way to determine ahead of time who's eligible to be registered off that same list?
Well, they know that day, but they don't know that we already registered them, a week
No,
ago.
we saying as far as the population of who is not registered. So is it a way that you can look from that list? If I provide, what information would be needed to know if a person qualifies? You see, that's the big thing, because if it's a felony.
So I have another question.
Okay.
that would be an implementation thing. So it would be a matter of just like, mixing the lumps out of the mashed potatoes. Like we can get to that, but we need to start doing it to be able to identify those things.
So one question that I would run into when the league would go into the jail, we talked to the GED classes. And people wanted to know, at what point are you considered convicted if they do a plea bargain?
They're not convicted until the judge adjudicates that conviction. On the day of sentence is when they're convicted. Up to that point, they're still.
So do they actually meet with the judge, or is their lawyer meeting with the judge?
No, they meet with the judge.
Okay, so when they go before the judge.
For sentencing day. On sentencing day is when they are convicted.
Because, they didn't want to get into any more trouble. So I can understand that.
And that's a thing, that's a real thing. And this is where I say the more frequently people can come in, the more educated they'll be.
We'll be there.
But yeah.
Yes.
So, the Board of Elections periodically sends out postcards to registered voters. I recently got one, and I know that when it comes back, address unknown, I think they take the person off the voting rolls, or at least look into it a little bit more. Also, if you don't vote for 2 successive federal elections, which would mean this year's a federal election, 2 years from now, you're also taken off the voting rolls until you're re-registered. A lot of incarcerated people, probably most, are, even when they're not incarcerated, they don't have a long-term address. People move frequently. So how do you address that? That you basically have to keep re-registering in order to stay on the voting rolls.
This is what the league does.
Yeah.
Because people move. Even people who have not been in jail move a lot. So that's why we do so many voter registration events, trying to catch people. And I am going to wrap this up now. But thank you so much for our panelists coming today and our poets. We really appreciate it. Thank you.